The moment that changed everything didn't arrive with shouting or scandal. It came quietly, like a hand on the shoulder you never expected, on an ordinary afternoon in Ohio when the past suddenly asked to be heard again. I had gone back to my ex's house only to return a box of old mail. Nothing more, nothing dramatic, but standing there in the doorway was her mother, Margaret Collins, looking at me with eyes that carried years of unsaid things. The air felt heavier than it should have, and when she asked if we could go someplace alone, my chest tightened in a way I didn't understand yet. I denied the request without raising my voice, without anger, but the refusal echoed inside me long after I left the driveway because I knew that moment was going to force me to face wounds I had spent years pretending were healed. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of doing the right thing even when it hurts, please take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. My name is Aaron Whitmore, and for a long time I thought my life was defined by what I had lost. I grew up in a small Midwestern town, the kind where church bells still mattered and neighbors remembered your name. I met my ex, Rachel Collins, when we were both trying to escape the smallness of that place while secretly fearing the loneliness beyond it. We built something that looked solid from the outside, but inside it was cracking under expectations, misunderstandings, and our inability to talk honestly about pain. When it ended, it didn't end cleanly. It ended with silence, with unanswered messages, with a sense that I had failed not just her, but an entire family that had once welcomed me like a son. Margaret had been kind to me in those days, steady and warm, always reminding me to eat more and worry less. After the breakup, I disappeared, believing distance was the only way to survive. Years passed. I moved to Columbus, took a job that paid the bills but not the soul, and tried to convince myself that moving on meant forgetting. But some things don't fade just because you look away. When Rachel's father passed unexpectedly, news reached me through a mutual friend, and guilt settled in my bones. I waited months before reaching out, unsure of my place, unsure if my presence would reopen wounds better left closed. Eventually, I decided to do something small and safe, returning mail that had followed me through moves in time. I told myself it was just a courtesy, nothing more. Seeing Margaret again unraveled that lie. She looked older, yes, but also smaller, as if grief had folded her inward. When she suggested we go someplace alone, my mind raced through possibilities I didn't want to consider. It wasn't fear of temptation or scandal, it was fear of crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. I had spent years rebuilding my sense of integrity, learning to respect boundaries I once ignored. So I denied the request, gently but firmly, and left. Yet denial didn't bring relief. It brought questions. Why had she asked? What pain was she carrying that she felt she could only share with me? For days afterward, I wrestled with myself. Memories surfaced of Thanksgiving dinners, of Margaret defending me when Rachel and I fought, of quiet moments when she treated me like family. I realized my denial wasn't rejection of her humanity, it was protection of all of us. Still, the ache remained. I began volunteering at a local food pantry, trying to ground myself in service, hoping that helping strangers might silence the noise inside. Instead, it sharpened my awareness of how many people carry unspoken grief. A week later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, careful. It was from Margaret. She wrote about loneliness, about how after her husband's death and her daughter's move across the country, the house had become an echo chamber of memories. She admitted that asking to be alone with me wasn't about anything inappropriate, it was about wanting to speak freely, without reopening family wounds, about regret and forgiveness. She respected my denial and apologized for putting me in that position. Reading her words, I felt something inside me loosen. The world wasn't asking me to betray my values, it was asking me to live them fully. I wrote back, suggesting we meet in a public place, a small cafe near the river, where sunlight and people could keep things honest. We talked about life without revisiting the past in harmful ways. We spoke of faith, of loss, of how love sometimes looks like letting go. There was no drama, no secrets exchanged, just two people acknowledging pain and choosing grace. That meeting didn't erase the past, but it reframed it. I learned that denying a moment doesn't mean denying compassion, it can mean redirecting it into something healthier. Slowly, my own life began to shift. I started opening up at work, forming real friendships instead of hiding behind productivity. I returned to church, not out of obligation, but out of hunger for community. I even forgave myself for mistakes I had carried like a sentence. Margaret and I exchanged occasional holiday cards, nothing more, nothing less, each respecting the space that kept our connection clean and kind. What surprised me most was how inspired I felt by that single act of saying no. In a culture that often equates goodness with compliance, I learned that true kindness sometimes requires restraint. Boundaries are not walls, they are bridges that keep relationships from collapsing under their own weight. By denying that request, I honored the best parts of who I wanted to be. If this story is touching something deep inside you, if it's reminding you that doing the right thing is rarely loud but always powerful, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement keeps these stories alive and reaching hearts across the world. Before the ending, here's a special request. Please comment the word grace if you believe that respect and compassion can coexist, even in the most complicated moments. Today, when I think back on that afternoon in Ohio, I don't feel regret. I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the strength to pause, for the wisdom to choose integrity over impulse, and for the reminder that healing doesn't always come from saying yes. Sometimes it comes from a quiet no offered with empathy that opens the door to a better yes later on. If this story moved your heart even a little, let your voice be part of it, because your kindness, like mine that day, might change more than you realize.